Hey YouTube, Phil20 today, and what we've got here for you today is just a story. This is a story about how I've got into solar, why I decided to start getting into solar, and why is it important for you, the individual, everybody out there on YouTube land, and everybody out there that can see this. Why is it important for you to go to solar? I mean, is it something that you want to do? Is it something that you thought, maybe not really that important? So let's look. This story is from about 10, 11 years ago. The story is about me learning lessons. It's also me learning the capability of solar. So, years back when I was a young heat pump technician, I was working on heating and air conditioning, from 16 to now. I mean, that's all I know. My dad had tools for all that stuff back, when I was younger. But, I started in solar when I moved to a place. When I moved in, I had to have an electric bill. I had to pay it, etc. Or I thought in my mind, well, why don't I just go and why don't I just go get some solar panels? They make electricity, and then I can turn that electricity into power I can use. So that's what I did. I was gung ho. Buy some batteries, buy an inverter, buy some Harbor Freight solar panels. And that's the only solar panels that was local, that was affordable. All the other solar panels was ridiculously expensive, and I couldn't figure out why Harbor Freight was the cheapest back then, but it was. That was the cheapest place to get solar panels back then, so I got 45 watts. The 45 watt kit consisted of a charge controller, 2 solar panels, 2 light bulbs, a couple wires to go to light bulb to the charge controller, and terminal leads for batteries. And these terminal leads had tiny wires on it. I was like, that's little wires. No big deal. So let's wire it up. So I wired it all up. I run them all in parallel and, attached it to the charge controller. Then bam, I'm charging batteries. So I flipped on the TV, the PlayStation 3, went and cooked some food on the microwave, and my batteries went dead. My batteries went dead really fast because I got the incorrect batteries. I got the cold cranking amp batteries, and it just didn't work. I mean, they was really big. I thought bigger was better. I had 4 of them, and then I realized right then that I just spent a lot of money on a hobby system. I realized that this was a hobby system, and I'm going to have a lot bigger than what I currently had. So I realized that, and I guess I went and paid the power company. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to have electricity. I did it for 2 weeks. I run off-grid for 2 weeks. And because I spent all of my money on the solar kit. I spent my paycheck on the solar kit, and I was really, really upset at the fact that I ended up doing that. But it's okay. I'm not upset. It's totally okay. So I learned that that's when I really wanted to do solar. I wanted to do solar really, really well, but I ended up in a situation that I had put myself in. So I lived on solar for 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks I used the microwave a few times. I got to play no video games. It was out of the question. And, I learned my lesson. So I moved forward from that. I had these solar panels that hardly did anything. So, it's a hobby. It was a hobby kit. So I had these solar panels that would hardly do anything, and I really learned right then that solar is a hobby, and it's my hobby that I decided to go with from then on out. So I decided to build, more and more, and I ended up with 3 sets of Harbor Freight until 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I found this company called theinverterstore.com, and they sold solar panels at dramatically cheaper prices than Harbor Freight solar panels. So I picked up one. It done more power with that one solar panel than all of the Harbor Freight solar panels combined. And I was like, wow, this is a really good solar panel. This is a really good system. And it was an Ames solar panel. And I was so excited that I picked another one up 6 months later. And then, bam, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I already had built the device that I was mounting it on. I measured it all exactly the same. And then, bam, the solar panel that came was different and smaller. So I had to rebuild the rack that I made. The rack was made out of steel. I welded everything together. And bam, I was nailed like a ton of bricks. That I'd done all the work before it got there. And then nothing was the same. And then I knew right then, when I called them up and said, hey, this solar panel ain't even close to the same size as the one I ordered. And they said, oh, well, it's the same amount of power. It does the same amount of power. I said, it's not the same size. Yeah, it's the same amount of power. Well, it doesn't matter about the power output to me. What mattered to me is the aesthetics on the house. So I had 2 different size solar panels matched up beside each other, and it was all messy. So I spread them apart, and I put the Harbor Freights in the middle. That way the left and the right would not be as obvious. So it did pretty good for 3 years. The batteries, I always run the batteries fluid low on those batteries. I killed them. I killed them bad too. I mean, I discharged them down to nothing many a times. But when I got the Ames Pure Sine Wave Inverter last year, I decided I want to go with a cleaner power, because things I was plugging into the modified sine wave inverters would stop working, and they would stop working pretty quickly. So I definitely wanted to get rid of the problem that I was having. The problem I had was I don't want to buy new stuff because I'm running everything off of solar, because buying something's a whole lot more expensive than running it off of the grid power. So I decided to go ahead and do pure sine wave. I got that 600 watt inverter that Troy used. I knew that I didn't want to go big because my system was tiny. And 300 watts is a tiny system. It's not big at all. And I realized that early on. It won't run much. It just won't. So I knew right then. And it was important to me to progress. I ended up with that 24 volt inverter 4 years ago, but I couldn't even run it. I tried to run it off of my system, but I couldn't even run it because I didn't have enough solar power to even turn the thing on. The thing uses 200 watts to run, and then running solar 300 watts into it at peak hours. You're only making enough to run 100 watts. So, it was pure sine wave, and I wanted pure sine wave, but I couldn't run it. It's because it was so inefficient. And, I just put it up from there, and then I said, well, when I get the money, I'll just put a big system on the roof. I went from 300 watts to 3,000 watts, and then bam, night and day difference. It really, really made a big difference. So after I went ahead and put everything together, I appreciated the solar that I had. I put all the new batteries in. I run all the wiring. I don't know if you've seen some of my older videos, but the solar array that I had before, It was awful. It was a terrible mess. I had the charge controllers laying on a shelf, wired up, and then I had the batteries laying on the shelves, and the wires was strangled everywhere, and it looked terrible. And I realized that, my wife wouldn't touch that thing with a 10-foot pole. She was probably afraid to death that I was going to burn the place down with that. So I realized I wanted to cover everything up and make it all aesthetically pleasing. And that way she'll turn stuff on and off without having to worry about making or concerned about making it damage. And I wanted to simplify it to where it was easy for her to use. So I did that. I done everything that I needed to do. It was only 2 switches to work, and it worked good. And then the Ames inverter quit holding at 60 hertz after about 2 months. So I ran that inverter for roughly around 2 months before it had quit. 2 months, and then it quit. And I called Ames, and they said, well, it's going to be X number of dollars, and might not be the part that you need. And then I realized that the battery selector switch didn't work neither. So that was a big problem for me. The battery selector switch, I would have been able to put a little tiny relay on that battery selector switch, and it would turn on and off, and it would have been so nice. But I couldn't because it didn't work. It never worked once. I don't recall it ever working. And they just burned me. Ames Inverters is the worst customer service I've ever had. Now, don't get me wrong, that high frequency 600 watt inverter is a solid inverter. It does really, really, really well. It's really efficient, and the reason why I got it was because it was small. It could run on my system. But now I can't even run my system because I'm running off of that monster inverter in there. I'll never use more than 3,500 watts continuous at one given point in time, unless I manually go out and turn every single device that I own on purpose. Microwave, the mini stove, dishwasher, both refrigerators, TVs, you name it, washing machine. I'll never use more than 4,000 watts at any given point in time. So I'll end up getting the Magnum 48 volt inverter, and I'll be getting that one in a 4,400 watt range with a 8,000 or 9,000 peak. I think it's around there. So I'll end up getting that eventually. But as of right now, I'm really focused on trying to get the most out of what I've got. I'm having trouble with this system, and charging when it's cloudy is really difficult after you discharge so far down. So, I've got a Whiz Bang Junior in my mind, and I really want it pretty bad. So that's something that I'm going to have to do. And that Whiz Bang Junior is going to allow me to turn off the batteries at 90% and stop killing them, because I've been running them down really low. I want to stop that, and that's important to me. But this was just a story. I'm sorry it drug out to a long story, but this is a story for you. That way you know what's happening in my lifestyle of going solar. I don't want you guys to have to deal with going solar from, as a hobby, and then try to go further, and then try to go further, because it's really expensive to build a hobby system. If you want to go solar, I highly recommend you go with a professional, and then you have the whole thing installed. Unless you already know how to do it, which is totally fine. If you know how to do it, you've probably been doing a hobby system for a while. And if you wanted to do that, it'd be great. I really encourage you to do it. It's a relief when the power is out and I still have power. It's a total awesome relief. The neighbors, they ain't got no power. I sent them a power cord to the refrigerator, and they're happy. It's really cool. They're happy. So I want to say thank you. This is Philip with Solar Power Electricity and Electronics. I've got a gaming channel. Check it out right here if you like video games. And then if you want to ask me any questions, I'm more than willing to try to answer them for you the best that I can. This is Philip 20, and I'll holler at y'all later.